There were a few things faster in the 1930s than an Alfa Romeo race car, and something else you can do really fast is become a subscriber to the network. Click that button now, click the bell icon to be notified when we put out great new content, and join us. Welcome to the Audrain Automobile Museum in Newport, Rhode Island, and our exhibition, The Magic of Monaco, running here on the gallery on Bellevue Avenue from December 14th, 2024 to March 9th, 2025. This highlights video is going to speak about these two amazing Alfa Romeos and what they represent in terms of the shift in performance in the 1930s and what that meant, especially for the combating nations. I'm joined for this by my friend Nick Waller. Nick, these are two cars that really speak to us because we love pre-war Alfas.
We love pre-war Alfas. We've both owned Alfas. I still own an Alfa Romeo in England.
As do I.
Love them to death. And I think what it is interesting, and you just pointed out, is that in the 1930s, it wasn't about the team so much as the nation. You supported your country. You supported Italy, you supported France, you supported Great Britain. And the colors of the cars really echoed whatever country they belonged to, who they were built by, who they were entered by. And these two cars are right in the middle of the 1930s. It's a very interesting era politically in Europe, and tell a fascinating tale.
It's very interesting. I'm going to take a second to do a little sidebar on color.
Yes.
Because everyone knows the national colors, racing colors, red for Italy, green for England, white for Germany, white and blue for the USA,
yeah,
blue for France. But it was just the color, not the shade. And it's very interesting because you look at these two Alfa Romeos, and they are a much darker red than anyone associates with Italian racing red. But it's very interesting that after the war, this color became known as Alfa Red.
Yes, they owned it. They took it over. It's the same with British Racing Green. There is no British Racing Green. Fable says it started with Napier, who painted their first Napier, which ran in very, very early teens in a dark, dark green. That progressed. Aston Martin became a kind of
a pale metallic.
A pale metallic. I think it's actually called California Sage.
But we digress.
We digress.
These cars also feature in a very interesting point in the transition of racing cars. From the earliest racing cars, they were basically the cars that were built for customers to drive on the street, and they were adapted for racing use. And of course, back in the 1920s, it was quite usual for a driver to be accompanied by a riding mechanic.
Yes, indeed.
And of course, on the great distance races like the Mille Miglia and the Targa Florio, you had to have a navigator with you and a mechanic. So it's interesting that our Alfa Monza is a two-seater.
Yes. They performed all over Europe, as you say, in long-distance trials and rallies, but also in Grand Prix. And this example is one of the nicest cars you could ever wish to see from that era, and driven by the great Tazio Nuvolari.
Exactly, who not only triumphed in Grand Prix races, but also in the Mille Miglia.
Yeah.
And it's an astonishing thing. Oh, by the way, of course, we must acknowledge the generous loan of these two cars from our friend Peter Greenfield. And it's also wonderful because these cars are cars that get used.
Yes.
And especially with something like the 8C Monza, which is a car that you can actually take on a rally today.
And he does. Yeah.
You have to be brave and have to have your goggles and your proper helmet and all. But nonetheless, they're cars that you can use on the road. Once we get to the car that we have here, it becomes much more of a specialist thing. And it's also quite interesting because it was obviously the response, as we mentioned in the opening video, of Alfa Romeo to the threat of Mercedes and Auto Union that were building very specifically designed and tasked cars for the Grand Prix circuit.
Absolutely. And as we said, the political climate in Europe was red hot. Alpha red hot, perhaps. And the might of Germany was in the ascendancy. They were throwing so many Deutschmarks at winning all over the world, not just in motor racing, but in the Olympics. And they backed the teams from Auto Union and from Mercedes-Benz, and they were the beneficiaries, really, in the latter part of the 1930s throughout. And of course, the 8C35 was Alfa Romeo's answer to that. But was it successful?
Well, yes, in one spectacular instance, a sort of a brightly shining sparkler right before it goes dark. There's quite a legendary drive that Tazio Nuvolari had in one of these cars at the Nürburgring, where he stunned the German crowd by actually beating the Auto Unions and the Mercedes. One of the things, of course, is the fact that, especially the Auto Union, which was fearsomely fast and powerful, but its revolutionary rear engine design by Ferdinand Porsche also ate tires.
Yeah.
So they had to stop for tires, the Mercedes had to stop for fuel, and the Alfa could keep going.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's also quite interesting about this as well is the fact that with this national competition, at this point, Alfa Romeo was owned by the Italian government.
Yeah.
And they were building relatively few passenger cars, and as the decade would go on, they'd build even fewer as they got into war production as well. But they kept developing this chassis, sort of as the saying goes, chasing a dropping knife, trying to follow the Germans in the development. So they developed a V12 for this chassis, and it didn't find more success because, again, the Germans just kept stepping ahead and stepping ahead. But it's interesting too, of course, that Alfa Romeo is one of those companies, I think might be the only company, but someone out there can prove me wrong, that actually produced passenger cars all through World War II.
Absolutely.
There were Alfa Romeo passenger cars delivered every year. We don't want to necessarily know to whom they were delivered, but nonetheless they were. Our good friend Wilfredo Ricart, who was the director of Alfa Romeo Racing Development, kept coming up with these incredible plans during the war for these racing cars that would take this the next leap forward.
Yes.
And I think that it's a wonderful thing to think about what Alfa Romeo would accomplish after World War II with a pre-war car, the Voiturette Alfetta 158, after the war, because they realized that the answer was not in these big cars trying to go after German big cars.
Well, of course, the rules and the regulations changed as well. And that always affects, you know, what the previous year you go, I've got a great car, I've established, we're going to win next year, and then you get the letter from the FIA or the equivalent saying, oh no, we're going back to 1500 cc, or we're going to 4-cylinder, or whatever it is, a kilogram weight limit. And you go, oh, for heaven's sakes, what am I going to do now?
But it's amazing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, so you change and you adapt. And I think that's what's wonderful to see with the evolution of motor racing.
And I also have to say, even though the 8C Monza was outclassed and the 8C 35 really didn't fulfill its promise, it's also so wonderful just to see the engineering that Alfa Romeo put into these cars.
Oh, absolutely.
These engines are absolute pieces of beauty, and of course, the 8C 2900 cars that were road raced very successfully in the late 1930s and through the 1940s.
Yeah.
They were still, Phil Hill was still winning races in 1948 in a pre-war Alfa Romeo.
In the 298C, absolutely.
It's an astonishing
which
thing.
is a wonderful car. But then, of course, that post-war era did give birth to a number of some of the most beautiful racing cars, and I know we share a passion for the Lancia D50. But also, as you mentioned, the Alfetta 158, and then the later 159, and then the Maserati 250F. They are works of art.
And
They
that's
really
what makes
are.
this show so incredibly special. Now, there's something else, of course, which the eagle-eyed viewer will see on these cars, and they'll think, wait, just a second, I thought these were Alfa Romeos. Why does it say SF with that yellow shield and the black horse? Because, of course,
Enzo Ferrari. Enzo Ferrari was a great Alfa Romeo team driver, and then he went on to manage Scuderia Ferrari, which was the team, if you like, the semi-official factory team that ran the cars. So Enzo cut his teeth with Alfa Romeo, not just as a driver, but as a team manager. And of course, the rest is history. But he got his logo, the badge, was a gift, I think, from a fighter pilot in World War I.
From the fighter pilot's mother.
From his mother, that's
Yes,
right,
yes.
yes.
Baraka, who,
Yes.
and many people say, gee, he was shot down, so why would his symbol bring luck? But that's the
He
whole...
was an
that's the
ace.
business thing.
He was celebrated
Yes,
across
indeed.
Italy throughout the First World War. He was a hero of the nation, and I think Enzo played it right, and God bless Barack Mother for giving the honor to Ferrari.
And it's something that the Scuderia Ferrari, as the Alfa race team, as frankly it fumbled in the late 1930s, that's when Alfa took it back in-house and created Alfa Corse. And the fact that Enzo did not get along at all with Raffaele Ricart did not help things.
Well, there
as
are
well.
a lot of egos battling away, and you can imagine the boardroom at Alfa Romeo with Enzo perhaps at one end of the table and Ricart at the other end of the table, and the Alfa executives in the middle going, oh, just calm down. And then Enzo, of course, left, wasn't allowed to build cars for a number of years, and then establishes what
It
we
is,
know
it
today.
is one of those things that, as the expression goes, success has many mothers and failure is an orphan. But it's something too that timing just played so well into the hands of Enzo Ferrari, because he had his non-compete, as you just mentioned, which was taken up with World War II.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when the war ended, he was ready to go
Yeah.
and attack his old employer.
Yeah, yeah.
So these are amazing cars. It's just wonderful. The feeling of standing next to these cars is so great, because you stand next to them here in the gallery and you can just sort of smell the hot oil and the...
Absolutely. Well, the oil was hot when we pulled the cars in. They have beautiful oil coolers on the side, which are fascinating and beautifully designed. I mean, everybody's scratching their heads saying, what are these? Oil coolers. But the engineering, fabulous, and are still raced today. Peter Greenfield races them in anger with huge success around the circuits in the US, at Watkins Glen and Lime Rock and Monterey and Laguna Seca. These cars are still very, very worthy tools on the track. Fabulous to see them
astonishing
here.
things.
Yeah.
And a wonderful piece of history.
Yes.
And this is just part of the magic that you'll see in this exhibition, The Magic of Monaco, here at the Audrain Automobile Museum. And thank you for watching this, and come back to watch our next highlights video.